When tech billionaire Adrian Cross announced he'd marry whoever solved his impossible business challenge, socialites worldwide flocked to him. But while they threw money and connections at the problem, a quiet black woman named Nalani worked 3 jobs just to survive. What happened next shocked everyone who thought they knew the rules of power. Before we dive into this incredible story, hit that like button if you believe true worth isn't measured by wealth, and subscribe because stories like this deserve to be heard. Let me paint you a picture of Adrian Cross. Imagine a man who built a $4 billion empire before his 32nd birthday, someone so methodical and calculating that Wall Street analysts called him the algorithm because he seemed incapable of making emotional decisions. Adrian had revolutionized data security through his company CrossTech, but success had isolated him in a glass tower where human connection felt as foreign as failure. The media loved to speculate about his love life, or rather, the complete absence of one. Adrian had never been photographed with a romantic partner, never attended galas with dates, never even hinted at wanting companionship. To the world, he was married to his work, and that marriage seemed unshakable. But sometimes the universe has other plans, and those plans often begin with crisis. The crisis came in the form of a data breach that threatened to destroy everything Adrian had built. Not just any breach, but something so sophisticated and persistent that his entire team of cybersecurity experts was baffled. Every solution they implemented was circumvented within hours. Stock prices plummeted, clients fled, and for the first time in his adult life, Adrian Cross faced the possibility of losing everything. That's when he made the most shocking announcement of his career. Standing before a room full of reporters, his usually composed demeanor cracking just slightly, Adrian declared that he would marry whoever could solve CrossTech's crisis. Not hire them, not offer them money, marry them. The prize wasn't just his hand in marriage, but equal partnership in rebuilding his empire. The world went absolutely insane. Within hours, private jets were landing in New York from every corner of the globe. Vivian Sterling, the Texas oil heiress whose family controlled more petroleum than some countries, canceled a European vacation to fly in immediately. Priya Mehta, the Silicon Valley wunderkind who'd sold her first startup at 19, cleared her entire schedule. Isabella Rossetti arrived from Milan with an entourage that looked more like a small army, while Sophia Chen flew in from Hong Kong with briefcases full of market analysis and acquisition strategies. But while these titans of industry were making headlines and booking penthouse suites, there was someone else in Adrian's world who heard about the challenge. Someone the cameras never focused on. Someone whose name would never appear in Forbes or Vogue. Her name was Nalani Washington, and at that moment, she was emptying trash bins on the 47th floor of CrossTech Tower. Nalani worked the night shift as a janitor, a job that paid just enough to keep her small family afloat while she chipped away at crushing student loan debt from her psychology degree. Every night she moved through those gleaming corporate hallways like a ghost, invisible to the executives who stayed late, cleaning up their messes while they planned their next big moves. She had dreams once, dreams of using her education to help people, to make a difference. But life had other plans, and sometimes survival means putting dreams on hold. What made Nalani's situation even more heartbreaking was that she wasn't just supporting herself. Her younger brother Kai had been in a wheelchair since a car accident 2 years earlier, and their grandmother Nana Rose was battling diabetes without proper insurance. Nalani's paycheck stretched between medications, physical therapy, and keeping food on the table. She was brilliant, educated, and compassionate, but to the world around her, she was just another invisible worker keeping the machine running. Now, watching these elite women descend upon New York was like witnessing a masterclass in power and privilege. Each one arrived with the absolute certainty that this challenge was simply another business transaction they could dominate through sheer force of wealth and connections. Vivian Sterling made the first move, and it was breathtaking in its audacity. Within 24 hours, she had hired 3 of the world's most expensive consulting firms, spending $2 million before most people had even finished reading about the challenge in the news. Her approach was pure Texas oil money. If you can't solve it with 1 million, throw 10 million at it. She rented an entire floor of the Ritz-Carlton and turned it into a war room filled with cybersecurity experts, data analysts, and former government intelligence officers. But Priya Mehta had a different strategy altogether. This wasn't just about solving Adrian's problem for her. This was about acquiring his entire company. While Vivian was throwing money at external consultants, Priya was quietly attempting to orchestrate a hostile takeover. She started buying up Crosstech shares through shell companies, convinced that if she could gain controlling interest, she could solve the problem from the inside while making Adrian dependent on her expertise. Meanwhile, Isabella Rossetti brought European sophistication to corporate espionage. She leveraged her fashion industry connections to place informants throughout Adrian's social circle, believing that the solution lay not in technology, but in insider information. Her approach was elegant and ruthless, silk gloves hiding steel claws as she maneuvered through Manhattan's elite social scene, gathering intelligence over champagne and caviar. Sophia Chen took the most analytical approach, treating the challenge like a complex financial derivative. She assembled teams of market researchers and used her Hong Kong banking connections to analyze every possible economic angle of the crisis. Her theory was that the data breaches were actually coordinated market manipulation, and she intended to track the money trail to find the perpetrators. Each woman was more ruthless than the last, and the media coverage was relentless. Every morning brought new headlines about their latest moves, their spending, their theories. The challenge had become the most expensive reality show in history, and Adrian found himself at the center of a storm that grew more intense by the day. But something fascinating was happening during those late-night hours when the cameras were gone and the consultants had gone home. As Nalani moved through Crosstech's offices with her cleaning cart, emptying waste baskets and wiping down conference tables, she began to notice patterns that everyone else was missing. Her psychology degree hadn't been wasted after all. It had trained her to observe human behavior, and what she was seeing told a completely different story than what those expensive consultants were reporting. The real problem wasn't in the code or the servers or the security protocols. It was in the people. During her months of working the night shift, Nalani had observed the mounting frustration among Crosstech employees. She'd seen the passive-aggressive emails left open on screens, overheard the bitter conversations in break rooms, witnessed the small acts of rebellion that happens when people feel unheard and undervalued. Adrian's management style had created a workforce of brilliant but disgruntled employees who felt more like machines than human beings. The data breaches weren't the work of external hackers. They were inside jobs, carried out by people who felt invisible and expendable in their own workplace. While millions of dollars were being spent on external solutions, the answer was walking the halls every night, cleaning up after people who never saw her as anything more than part of the furniture. What happened next changed everything, and it started with a moment of pure human vulnerability that no amount of money could have predicted or purchased. It was 3 in the morning on a Tuesday when Nalani's world collided with Adrian's in the most unexpected way. She was cleaning his corner office, methodically working around his desk, while he sat hunched over his computer, looking more defeated than she'd ever seen any person look. The great Adrian Cross, the man worth billions, was crying. Not the silent, dignified tears you might expect from a corporate titan, but the raw, exhausted sobs of someone who had reached the absolute end of his rope. His company was hemorrhaging money, the media was calling him a failure, and every solution his expensive consultants had proposed had backfired spectacularly. Vivian's approach had actually triggered another security breach. Priya's hostile takeover attempt had been exposed, causing a stock crash that wiped out millions more in value. Nalani should have left. Protocol demanded that she respect his privacy and return later. But something in her psychology training, something deeply human and compassionate, made her pause. Here was a person in pain, and she recognized that pain because she'd lived it every day for years. The weight of responsibility for other people's lives, the crushing fear of failure, the loneliness of carrying burdens no one else could understand. So she did something that would have gotten her fired if anyone had found out. She left an anonymous note on his desk. Not advice about code or security systems, but insight about the human cost of treating employees like expendable resources. She wrote about the conversations she'd overheard, the frustration she'd witnessed, the small acts of sabotage she'd observed from the workers who felt voiceless and invisible. The next morning, Adrian stared at that note for hours, Someone had seen what his highly paid experts had missed entirely. Someone understood that his crisis wasn't technological. It was deeply, fundamentally human. But who was this mystery person who had access to his office but possessed insights that none of his executives had offered? Meanwhile, the competition was reaching dangerous new levels. Isabella Rossetti had discovered Nalani's identity through security footage analysis, and what she found sent her into a cold, calculating rage. The idea that some minimum wage janitor might have insights that could threaten her chances was absolutely unacceptable. Isabella's next move was as brilliant as it was cruel. She arranged to have Nalani's work schedule investigated, her family situation exposed, and her financial vulnerabilities mapped out like a military strategy. Then she made Nalani an offer that wasn't really an offer at all: stay quiet and invisible, or watch her disabled brother lose his medical coverage and her grandmother get evicted from her apartment. The message was clear: know your place, stay in your lane, and let your betters handle the important decisions. Isabella even offered Nalani $1,000 to keep silent, an amount that revealed how little she understood about dignity and how much she misunderstood about the kind of person she was threatening. But Adrian was conducting his own investigation. The mysterious note had haunted him, and he'd started paying attention to details he'd never noticed before. He began staying later, observing his night shift workers, asking questions that his executives found puzzling. Why was employee turnover so high? When had his staff started looking at him with barely concealed resentment? How had he become so disconnected from the people who actually made his company function? The truth was building toward an explosion that would shatter every assumption these powerful women had made about worth, value, and who deserved to be heard. The final presentation meeting was scheduled for a Thursday morning that would become legendary in corporate history. Adrian had called all remaining contestants to present their solutions in Crosstech's main conference room, with media representatives and company executives in attendance. The air was electric with anticipation and barely contained ambition. Isabella walked in first, radiating confidence in her designer suit, carrying a presentation that she believed would seal her victory. What no one in that room knew was that her solution was built entirely on stolen insights from Nalani's anonymous communications with Adrian. She had used her resources to intercept and decode the mysterious advice that had been helping him understand his company's real problems. Sophia followed with charts and graphs that reduced human suffering to statistical models, while Vivian arrived with a team of consultants wheeling in elaborate displays of her technical solutions. The room felt like a battlefield where billions of dollars and massive egos were about to collide. But Adrian had spent weeks preparing for this moment in ways none of them could have anticipated. His investigation into the mysterious note writer had led him down a path of discovery about his own company that was both humbling and enlightening. He had learned about employees working multiple jobs to afford rent, about brilliant minds being wasted on mundane tasks, about human beings being treated like replaceable components in his corporate machine. When Isabella began her presentation, stealing Nalani's insights about employee empowerment and human-centered management, Adrian let her speak for exactly 7 minutes before he did something that stopped every heart in that room. He stood up and said, "Thank you, Isabella, but I'd like to invite the real author of this solution to present it herself." The silence was deafening. Isabella's face went white as Adrian walked to the back of the room and opened a door that led to the service corridor. Nalani Washington walked in, not in a designer suit but in her simple work clothes, carrying a folder that contained the most revolutionary business proposal any of them had ever heard. What happened next was pure poetry. Nalani didn't just present a solution to Crosstech's data security problems. She presented a complete reimagining of how a company could operate when it remembered that employees were human beings with dreams, fears, and untapped potential. She talked about profit-sharing models, mental health initiatives, educational opportunities, and creating pathways for advancement that weren't based on connections or background, but on merit and dedication. The room was mesmerized. Here was someone who understood both the technical aspects of the crisis and the human psychology that had created it. She spoke with quiet authority about employee satisfaction metrics, retention strategies, and how treating people with dignity wasn't just morally right, it was profitable. But the most beautiful moment came when Adrian addressed the elephant in the room. He looked directly at Isabella and said, "Corporate espionage is a federal crime. Threatening employees and their families is also illegal. Security, please escort Miss Rossetti out. One by one, the other contestants watched their own schemes unravel. Vivian's consulting firm connections were revealed to have overbilled and underdelivered. Sophia's market manipulation tactics triggered SEC investigations. Priya's attempted hostile takeover had violated numerous financial regulations. The universe had delivered karma with surgical precision. Adrian then did something that shocked everyone, including Nalani. He offered her equal partnership in rebuilding Crosstech, but without the marriage clause. He recognized that forcing marriage would diminish her achievement and their potential relationship. Instead, he offered genuine courtship based on mutual respect and shared values. 6 months later, Crosstech became the most employee-focused company in the tech industry, and Nalani had become one of the most respected voices in corporate human relations. Sometimes the best endings aren't about getting everything you thought you wanted. They're about discovering what you actually needed. This story hits differently because it reminds us that in a world obsessed with surface-level success, authentic human connection and genuine insight will always triumph over manipulation and greed. Nalani didn't win because she played their game better. She won because she understood something they never could, that true power comes from seeing people as human beings, not resources to be exploited. If this story moved your heart the way it moved mine, hit that subscribe button right now. Share this with someone who needs to remember that their worth isn't determined by their bank account or their job title. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think about Nalani's journey. Did it change how you view success and recognition? Because stories like this don't just entertain us. They remind us that justice, compassion, and authenticity still matter in this world. Keep believing in the power of being genuinely human.